That's the one.
If you're a frequent diner, then you for sure have seen or ordered the Patty Melt on the menu. It's a 4-ingredient sandwich of toasted rye, caramelized onions, cheese, and a burger patty. But don't let those simple ingredients fool you. It's dang tasty, and we're gonna see if we can make it even better. Sound good? Let's cook. I'm going to be caramelizing these 2 large onions, and to me, the absolute best onions to use are yellow or Spanish, simply because they become the most balanced in sweet and savory flavors as they do caramelize. And as always, any scraps go in the freezer for stock. You want to cut these in between an 1/8 inch and a 1/4 inch thick julienne. Too small and they'll burn up, too big and you'll have a big old piece of onion that's not easy to eat. Be sure to keep the onion on the flattest side to stabilize it from rocking when you do slice it. Taking my onions over to the cooktop, any wide, thick bottom pan like this stainless steel rondeau will work, or a cast iron skillet is also excellent. The wider, the better to help cover as much surface area as possible for optimal caramelization. Now you can use lard, oil, clarified butter, ghee, tallow, this part is up to you. I've personally always believed butter has brought out the most flavor in caramelizing onions, so 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter into the pan for me. We are going to turn the heat up to medium. Once the butter melts, let's add those onions in there and give it a gentle season of coarse salt, maybe 1/4 teaspoon, just to help draw out some moisture to help speed up the process. Once you stir the onions and salt together, we're adding a lid and we're going to let it sit untouched for 5 to 6 minutes. During this process, the liquid that the onion will secrete will help steam in the pan to again help quicken the procedure of caramelizing. After that amount of time, let's come back. Smile, you're on camera. You can see there's no moisture on the bottom of the pan. Everything is starting to brown up very nicely. Let's give it a stir. We are well on our way. And from this point, we are turning the heat down to low. We are going to come back every 6 to 8 minutes, see how things are doing, and of course, give it a quick stir. Now, this is probably going to take in between 30 or 40 minutes to become a deep, dark color that's loaded with flavor. Even my wife, who doesn't like onions, digs these. And me, I cook for smiles.
Now, one of the main reasons I actually like using stainless steel is because I can see what's going on the bottom of the pan. See all that goodness, that fond, that deliciousness? That's flavor. Also, if things are starting to get a little bit too hot, you're noticing maybe quite a few dark spots around the outside of the pan, or the onions are darkening a little bit too quickly, a really simple trick is to deglaze with a few tablespoons of water. This will help release the fond and sort of slow down the process a little bit so that the onions can sort of recapture that perfect temperature and continue to push it all the way through until they are caramelized.
And let's be good stewards of our time and get all of our mise en place in check, beginning with 2 pounds of ground chuck. Now, I prefer this over sirloin because it has a beefier flavor, and its 80 to 20 lean to fat ratio is ideal for having the most flavor because of that amount of fat. Plus, it's going to help keep our burger patty really juicy. And you can, of course, take this to the next level and make your own ground beef. If you're interested in doing that, I've got an awesome blend in my cowboy burger recipe video if you want to check that out.
Now, it's always a good idea to pop the ground beef in the freezer for maybe 10 minutes or so before you start working with it. The main reason being, your hands are warm. It's going to start melting the fat in the beef, and it's going to get sticky, and you're going to get really annoyed. Now, when it comes to making patties, I usually do 1/4 pound burgers, but I'm going to go a little bit heavier, maybe 1/3 pound or so, and you totally can eyeball this. But if you're really serious about cooking, I definitely recommend picking up a scale that reads both metric and imperial.
Now, the biggest thing here is not to overmix the ground beef and pack it in too tight because it can become tough. Kind of like overworked bread, if you will. A simple, gentle forming of it as soon as you get it into your hand is perfect. And these little things put into practice will absolutely make you a better cook. And since these burger patties are a little bit bigger and loaded with fat, they're going to tighten up quite a bit as I cook them. So I'm going to make sure they're a little bit wider to fit on that rye bread. So once it reaches about 5 inches in diameter, I'm just going to transfer it over to a sheet tray lined with parchment paper, and then I'm going to press it down a little bit more until it's roughly 6 inches in diameter. You can absolutely eyeball this, and then
I'm going to press down in the middle so it doesn't pop up and make a meatball looking burger thing that we definitely do not want.
While I finish these up, here's how the patty melt came to be.
The patty melt itself was created in the late 1940s by a man named Tiny Naylor, who was the owner of Biff's Drive-Ins and Tiny Naylor coffee shop restaurants in California. The patty melt was first added to the menu at Tiny Naylor's coffee shop as a beef patty between two slices of rye bread. Now, to help spread the word, his son Biff Naylor, now the owner of Dupar's chain on the West Coast, added it to the menus across his family's restaurants. You also may remember this shot from the famous photographer Bruce Johnson of Tiny Naylor's Drive-In, which was made famous because it was the cover of the 1984 Beastie Boys album, Ill Communication. Now back to patty making. You should have a total of 6 patties from the 2 pounds of ground beef, again, roughly a third pound each. We are going to place them in the refrigerator and keep them nice and cold until they're ready to be cooked. I think now's probably a good time to go back and check out our onions, give them a stir. They are a beautiful dark brown, so much flavor in there. And you become a better cook by practicing and tasting. Knowing what things taste like at which stage is huge. So be sure not to skip steps like this. Try your food. It'll also make the cooking process a lot more enjoyable. Now, to just push these onions right over the top, I'm going to deglaze with 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. It's just going to give it a little pop and elevates the tangy and savory flavors of that caramelized onions with that acidity. And just this simple basic technique of slow cooking the onions is well worth the time. I promise you, whomever you're feeding will know you showed them love by taking the time and care to do this. Then we're just going to quickly adjust the seasonings with just a little bit of coarse salt. You want every step of every ingredient to be seasoned. In the end, you'll end up using less salt, and everything will be tastier. And you know how delicious food always has a way of bringing people around the table. What we're going to do is just add on a lid, set it to the side. It will be plenty warm when we need them. And in the meantime, I've got 1 loaf of rye bread. You can usually pick this up at a local bakery or even Whole Foods. We are going to slice the bread until we have about 1-inch thick slices all the way down. But for that end piece, I think I'll probably eat that one. Next up, I have a total of 12 ounces of Swiss cheese right off the block, which I'm going to shred.
Now, for me, shreds, for some reason, they just taste better. And I don't know if it's because we're doing it straight from the block. I've also heard there's more oxygen and surface area. Honestly, I don't have a clue. But if you do know, would you drop it in the comments below, please?
And once you're done shredding it, just briefly set it to the side at room temperature, no problem. And of course, you can for sure use Swiss cheese slices for this sandwich. Now, let's start cranking up the heat on everything. It doesn't matter if you have a built-in griddle or you've got a standalone griddle that you can put right over your burners, or even a large cast iron pan is perfect here. Now, the heat for any of these needs to be about 400 degrees, so you're looking at about medium-high heat. And yeah, I bought one of these little infrared thermometers a couple years ago, and I'm right at 400 degrees. Now it's time to get cooking. So we're going to pull out our ground beef, and I don't like to season it until right before cooking it. If you pre-season the meat, it will become packed and dense like a meatloaf, if you will. That's fine if you're making meatball or meatloaf, but not for a burger. We're going to generously season with coarse salt and fresh cracked black pepper. And you know my rule, when you season high to cover as much surface area as possible. But we're only seasoning it on one side for now. Take those burger patties over to our griddle where it's at 400 degrees. I'm going to add on just a little bit of avocado oil, maybe a teaspoon. You could also use butter. Then we're going to place our burger patty seasoned side down. As soon as it's on there, we're going to generously season that other side with coarse salt and freshly cracked black pepper. We are going to let this sit untouched for 3 minutes. While this is cooking, I'm just going to go back over to my cooktop and spread 1 to 2 teaspoons of softened unsalted butter on each side of that rye bread. This will, of course, help brown it up. And once you're buttered up, let's go back over to that griddle. Looking at the burger, once it starts to collect a lot of that moisture on the top, I know I'm really close, or at least at that perfect time to sort of scrape it away from that hot surface and give it a flip. Taking those 3 minutes to help sear the meat is only going to help build that beautiful Maillard brown crust. That's where all that flavor is going to come from.
After it's flipped, I'm next going to lay down the bread. Now, I toast the bread on both sides, mainly because when you do this, the bread will be able to stand up to all that juiciness that's going to go down in the sandwich without turning it into some mushy mess. So after maybe just 1 minute, let's give it a flip. Looks beautiful, nice and toasty. We're going to immediately add about 1/4 to 1/3 cup of shredded Swiss cheese on each toasted side of that rye bread. Then follow up each slice with about 2 tablespoons of those wonderful caramelized onions. And once your cheese is nice and melty, let's add that burger patty right on top. Flip the top part on. See the little crusty cheese thing hanging out on top? Yeah, I'm going to eat that. Then remove it from the griddle or your pan. Let's give it a slice and have a look. Golly, look at that juiciness. Let's get in this.
It's just simple. It's comforting. Some great beefy flavors in that. Just that little hint of acid, that vinegar and the onions just makes the beef even more delicious. I mean, this is something that you could absolutely share with your friends and family and that they will love. I mean, what else could you want? I mean, there definitely are some variations when it comes to the patty melt, some sauces, different breads, different cheeses. Let's give it a shot and put it to the test.
Now, one of the other main options is a standard white bread. So slice it thick. I've got an awesome homemade recipe if you want to check that out. Or the other bread that you may see on a menu is sourdough. If you want to make homemade, again, I've got an amazing recipe for you. Now, for the cheese component, the other cheeses you may see are American, Fontina, or even cheddar.
Now, some sauces that you will definitely find on a classic patty melt with a slight variation would be a Thousand Island dressing or even a Russian dressing. Now, I have both of these recipe videos, which you can check out or even go to my website at billyparisi.com and you can get the written version there. Now, Russian has a little bit more horseradish, and that's going to go really well with the beef, but you got the pickles in the Thousand Island. All right, let's see what we're going to do here.
So for this first one, I'm going in on the toasted white bread. I'm next going to add on some Fontina cheese and American cheese. I know I love American cheese with ground beef. I can't help myself. Then going to add on some of that Thousand Island dressing, putting the burger patty on top. Let's, of course, not forget about those caramelized onions. Put the top part of that bun on and boom, setting this one to the side because I want to try one more. This one I'm going to do rye, and I'm adding on a combination of Fontina and cheddar cheese. Loading it up with caramelized onions. We're doing Russian dressing this time. Burger patty, top toasted rye bread, and I'm drooling. Slicing both in half. Oh, the juice, the flavor. Yes, let's go.
Yeah, these look pretty ridiculous. Let's try the Thousand Island. Definitely get a lot more cheese in there, especially the American cheese, so it tends to be a little bit saltier with that. The sauce, not overpowering, but I definitely got that pickle in there, which I love with burgers. So good. And, you know, for me, I grew up on sandwiches. I don't know about you, but I've got the most amazing croque madame, and if you got leftover ham and you want to crack a little egg on top, that's the recipe you need to make. I've got an awesome video. I'll see you on there. That's the one. Russian dressing, Fontina cheddar on rye. That's the one.